reforms. It's in the Indian economy section. Let me give you some gist of it. And oh, I missed this part. Let me first do this. This is not in any question, but I just want to discuss this once. This is the 15th Finance Commission. Finance Commission, plan nahi baat kar rahe, commission, Finance Commission ki baat kar rahe. The 15th Finance Commission या किसी भी Finance Commission का काम क्या है? See, the center must share its revenues with the state. And state must share its revenue with the local bodies. अब ये किस रेशियो में होगा? How much will center keep? How much will state keep? How much will state share with the local bodies? These ratios, they are defined by the Finance Commission. And the formula for going ahead and for dividing this. Okay, very good. Great if it was there. Because although, I mean, Finance Commission, they haven't mentioned directly in the Indian economy, but it's good if it came in the exam. Okay, so how it will be divided? That is what Finance Commission does. Now, there are two more things that you should be seeing here. One is called horizontal devolution, and one is called vertical devolution. When I talk about horizontal devolution, horizontal मतलब between different states. कि अच्छा अगर एक स्टेट है जो उत्तर प्रदेश है, दूसरा है पंजाब, दूसरा है बिहार, and I have different states. How would I be dividing between states? This is what horizontal devolution is. How much will northeastern states be getting? Will any state be getting any special benefit or not? All that is horizontal devolution between states. States are at the same level, but I have to divide horizontally. On the other hand, vertical devolution tells me between center, state, and this. So it is vertical division. Kitna center ko milega, kitna state ko milega, and kitna local bodies ko milega. So these are the two kind of devolutions that I have. Devolution matlab sharing of the taxes. That's called devolution. Now, when we talk about the chairmanship of the 15th Finance Commission, it was under N.K. Singh, and his recommendations are for this period. Currently, we are following his recommendation because it is from 2021 to 2025-26. Vertical devolution was earlier at the rate 42%. अच्छा, एक और बात है, जब मैं फाइनेंस कमीशन की बात करती हूँ इन पर्टिकुलर, वो बताता है कि सेंटर एंड स्टेट के बीच में कितना डिवीजन है. Then something which is called State Finance Commission. These are also set up separately. These SFCs, they tell how much will be distributed between state and between rural bodies. So understand, one is Finance Commission. This is for center and state. Inke beech ka division. Then I have SFCs, State Finance Commission. They tell between state and rural bodies. Now, when I talk about the vertical devolution, this was at 42% earlier, which means the center was supposed to share 42% of its revenue with the states. This was reduced. ये 14th में था. It was reduced in the 15th Finance Commission to 41%. Reason being that because we changed Jammu and Kashmir status into new union territory, therefore state say 1% was reduced because we now changed its status into union territory. So one less to take here, and therefore it reduced to 41%. Then we also talk about horizontal devolution, and in horizontal devolution, this is the weightage that is given. So एक पूरा formula होता है. Usually in Delhi University, we actually have a full-fledged paper which we teach on, these finance commissions. But you should just know this formula. So what happened is we give 12.5% weightage to demographic performance. मतलब how am I performing demographically? What is my population? What is my, not population only, what is my age structure? Pura demographically, how do I look? That's 12.5%. The GDP is given 45% of the weightage. Think about it. If I have two states, one with high GDP and one with low GDP, shouldn't this state be given more taxes from center to state? Shouldn't this achieve more, right? So income is given a 45% weightage. यहाँ पर एक बहुत important point है, इसी का opposite है यहाँ पर, which is called tax and fiscal effort. This is given a weightage of 2.5%. What does this say? ये कहता है कि अगर सेंटर हमेशा स्टेट को देता रहेगा और उन स्टेट्स को ज्यादा देगा जिनका जीडीपी नहीं है, people who don't have GDP, if center keeps giving to the state, then what will happen? These states will become lethargic. They will never want to collect tax on their own. They will just think that the center is giving us enough money. They will stop working hard. There will be fiscal deficit always. So we have to maintain a balance. We must go ahead and also appreciate the states which are maintaining a fiscal discipline, which are acting correctly, which are collecting the tax, which are going ahead and having higher GDP, right? So we need to account for the fiscal effort that the state takes also. Of course, this differs from state to state. Some states, just for example, states which have high level of mountains, their economic activity will be less. If economic activity is less, they will collect less tax. If they collect less tax, they will always have a deficit. So we understand that there may be some regional restrictions on collecting money, on doing economic activities. That is why this is not given much weightage, but this should be given some weightage. Fiscal effort should be given weightage. Then the forest area. This is what I was mentioning there. This is also given weightage. How much greenery do you have? Do you focus on sustained development or not? Then we have population, given 15% weightage. Achha, isme bhi we have multiple points. Actually, what happens is that if you have higher population, this population figures, these are based on a base year. I'll have to find out what base year it was. I just forgot that. It is some 2002 year, very, very, very early base year. Okay. This is based on base year. अब इस साल में जितनी population थी, उसके behalf पे you will be getting money from the center. But your population can increase, one. Second, there can be a chance that if you are a developed state, then people from other state will come into your state. That will increase your population. So there should not be any reason that you account for this population at a very early year. कि 2002 में कितनी population थी, उसके base पे we will give you money today. This should be based on some present numbers. And what is the government to say in this? Government is saying that we are actually penalizing you for having higher population because we want you to control population. What if there is migration from one state to another? Then the state should not be penalized. So this is one aspect which you should be keeping in mind, that population is not taken at the current year. It is taken at some base year. And then 15% is given to the area. Of course, the more the area, the bigger the state. The bigger the state, the more money it requires to maintain it. So therefore, more area, more money required. Right? This is what this is about. Now let's go back to the question we were doing. And I want to talk about the major steps that took place in the 1991 reforms. सबसे पहले We want to understand why it took place. बहुत basic reason था. One, we had balance of payment problem. Our BOP was in a crisis. We were doing horrible in terms of balance of payment. Second, we had some structural rigidities. We had some industrial problems. We had some fiscal problems. We had some exchange rate problems, some monetary problems. And we wanted to go ahead and deal with all of these problems. And that is why these reforms were necessary. Now, let's go to what reforms were introduced. Why to ho gaya, but what were introduced? So the first reforms we introduced were called the fiscal reforms. Fiscal is always related to internal balance. BOP is external imbalance. Together they are called the twin imbalance problem. Right? So let's talk about the fiscal reforms. First, we wanted to correct this fiscal imbalance. We wanted to reduce the fiscal deficit, right? If you notice, you would have heard of Fiscal Regulation and Budgetary Management Act. It came in 2002. The aim was to make sure that you have a target. Ki isse upar fiscal deficit should not. This is the upper limit for my deficit. So we wanted to reduce fiscal deficit. We wanted to increase the share of direct taxes. What we saw that direct tax share was reducing. We had to change this downtrend towards an uptrend. So we wanted to reduce or revert the downtrend in the share of direct taxes. Then we wanted reduction in subsidies. Dekho, fertilizer subsidy was a huge amount of government's expenditure, right? Again, why? India was based on agriculture. Main occupation was agriculture. To boost agriculture, you required fertilizers. You were giving subsidy on this. When you were giving subsidy on this, you were doing heavy expenditure. So to reduce this subsidy so that you could reduce the deficit. Similarly, abolition of subsidy on sugar, right? Disinvestment of parts of government equity holding in select public undertaking. So we know that the government sector was highly unproductive. Government sector, especially the public sector, it wasn't doing very well. So we wanted to do disinvestment. किस का disinvestment करेंगे? जो भी NPAs थे. What is an NPA? It's a non-performing asset. तो government के वो areas, वो firms which were not doing well, which were in heavy losses, we wanted to give that to the private sector. We wanted to disinvest, reduce our investment in those sectors so that we could reduce our deficit, right? Acceptance of major recommendations. These were given by Raja Chelia Committee. This is important. You have to remember this name, right? This committee was related to only tax reforms. We are studying it under fiscal reforms. So we had the Raja Chelia Committee, and the aim was to increase the revenues, and the aim was to make tax structure more stable and transparent. So if you see, all these aim were to do two things: increase tax, decrease expenditure. Now we go to the second kind of reforms that were introduced, and these were monetary and financial reforms. Sabse pehla reform was on reserve requirement. We had high reserve ratios. So in reserve ratios ko kam karna tha. We wanted to reduce SLR. We wanted to reduce CRR. We wanted to make our banking sector more efficient. Now for banking sector, the most important committee was Narasimha Committee. तो देखो difference है. You should remember, tax reform was Rajacheria Committee. Banking sector reform was Narasimha Committee. Then we wanted to go ahead and do interest rate liberalization. Earlier, the interest rate, acha, you can just map this back. If you remember, we did all of those, na? Dornbusch overshooting model, balance of payment mein kaise hota hai, and we know that, you know, the interest rate moves. So we saw this BOP horizontal line, BOP upward sloping. So we saw that interest rate is associated with interest rate outside the world, outside your country. Both are having some relation. So here you have plus whatever expected risks you have, right? So we saw that the two interest rates are related to each other. How my interest rate is there and what is the interest rate in the outer world. But what happened in India is that we were doing heavy controlling of the interest rate in India. So we had to let go. We had to bring liberalization in the interest rate. This is what this says. So earlier RBI was controlling the interest rate. It was telling कि इस maturity पे इतना interest होना चाहिए, इस size of loan पे इतना interest होना चाहिए, with no power or no autonomy given to any bank. थोड़ा भी autonomy नहीं था. Now this is not the thing. Do you see that different banks have different interest rates? So they are given that autonomy now, right? So we had to do interest rate liberalization. And then we had greater competition among public, private, and foreign sector banks. Earlier, only public banks were there. We saw nationalization of the banks in one of the 5-year plans. Now, we wanted to bring in the private banks also, and we wanted to bring in the foreign sector banks also. So this is the next thing, private and foreign sector banks. This is what we wanted to introduce. Elimination of administrative constraint, ye to humein pata hi hai. There was a system of, you know, all these people taking bribe, no one working. How we wanted to kind of eliminate that. वो पूरा administrative system को better करना. That is what we wanted to focus on. So here, if you remember, there is something which is called ease of doing business. ये एक पैरामीटर होता है जो हर कंट्री का निकलता है, एंड उसके बेसिस पे ना इंडिया की रैंकिंग भी थी. इट वाज very low ranking. But this ranking tremendously improved once we, you know, got rid of this constraint. Once we got rid of the licensing system कि हर चीज के लिए पहले जाओ, पूरा लाइसेंस के लिए अप्लाई करो, इस पूरे प्रोसेस के थ्रू जाओ जहां पे you have to give bribe to everyone. Once we got rid of that licensing system, we started doing wonders, right? Then we had liberalization of bank branch licensing policy. Banks were given this chance that you could go ahead and you can create your branches. You can open your branches in any location. You can relocate yourself to whatever location you want. पहले ये सब नहीं था. So liberalization of the bank branch licensing policy. Banks given freedom to relocate and open specialized branches. Guidelines to open new private sector banks and norms for classification of non-performing asset, bad debt, etc. So we wanted to make sure that we understand which assets are performing well and which assets are not performing well. Then we have reforms in the capital market. Abhi humne padhe banking sector. We studied fiscal reforms. Now we want to go ahead and study capital market reforms. So first of all, we removed control of the government. Earlier, the stock market was also heavily government controlled. Now we brought in the setting up of SEBI, right? And this was there in 1988, and it was given a statutory recognition, more power in 1992. So we wanted to make the stock exchange board more powerful. We wanted to go ahead and make sure that there is a transparent system. We wanted to make sure that there is full disclosure, that people know which share they are buying, how the market is performing. So these were the reforms in the capital market. Then we had the industrial sector, industrial policy reform. इसमें पहला reform आया to give more competition to the domestic industry. Now, if you look at the earlier 5-year plan, their aim was to go ahead and to protect our industry, to avoid competition. And protect करने के लिए main क्या कर सकते हैं? जो भी बाहर से चीज आ रही है उस पे heavy tariff कर दो. Whatever comes from outside India, make it expensive. तो ये automatically protect हो जाएंगी. Plus give these people subsidies. Plus create special economic zones. Multiple things to protect them. Now we said protection is done. Now we want you to open up to competition from the outer world. So we went ahead and we increased, because we became open to the outer world. So we increased competition. We launched new industrial policy in 1991, 24 July. And we did deregulation of the industry. We reduced the licensing system. 18 industries ko chhodkar, except 18 industries, we completely removed this licensing system. No license was required to start your business. इसमें भी we had different rules कि small sector के लिए कितना होगा, medium sector industries के लिए कितने होंगी, so large sector industries के लिए क्या होगा, but still the ease of doing business was greatly improved. Then we went ahead with something which is known as a Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practice Act. And this was repealed to eliminate the prior approval of large company for the capacity expansion. तो एक बारी पढ़ के देखो, हम कह रहे restrictive trade. पहले trade restrictive था. People could not expand. उसके लिए उन्हें permission लेनी पड़ती थी. We wanted to remove that. We wanted to give everyone the power to go ahead and expand their capabilities. And that is where we brought in this act. Right? Then we had areas reserved for public sector narrowed from 17 to 8. So only 8 sectors were there, like railway, like atomic energy, where we only had public sector. Please make a list of all these 8 sectors. Make list of all 8 sectors. So these were those 8 sectors where we had only public sector. Uske alawa private could enter anywhere. Public sector was also given more power, more autonomy. And this is interesting. So kya hua? Jaise for example, railway. Let's say we have railway. And let's say we have Ministry of Railway. Let's say we have some company, MTNL. And let's say we have Ministry of Telecom. So between the ministry and the public sector, an MOU was made. And this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, ये क्या कहता है कि कितना इसका aim होगा इस साल का? What will it do? What will be the growth rate? What will be its target? How much will be its revenue? All this was written in this MOU so that they become more productive. So we had the signing of these MOUs between enterprise and ministry for achieving the target. This is what was done under your industrial reforms. सब कुछ 1991 policy ही है. Liberalization, privatization, globalization, but there are different reforms that came in. Then finally, you had the trade policy reforms. Trade policy reforms means better import, better export, rationalization of tariff structure. So, isme again, please remember, we had the Chelia committee because it is related to the tariff. It is related to the tax. So, kitna import duty hoga? How much import duty? How much will be the tariffs? Can we reduce the tariff? What should be done? How many trading houses would be established to increase the trading? All this was established under the trade policy reforms. Then we had the foreign investment policy. Foreign investment policy means now we wanted foreign direct investment. So we wanted the foreign sector to come in India, to establish MNCs in India, to give more jobs in India, to establish a complete 100% equity structure in India. मतलब पूरा का पूरा वही own करेंगे. We were open to that. So what did we do? We started making a list of high technology, high investment industries where automatic permission was granted for foreign direct investment. First, we went with 51% foreign equity. We increased that to 74% and we increased that to 100%. So multiple industries were there where 100% share was of the foreign sector. कुछ वो थी जहां पे हमने restriction लगाई that if you come in India, then 51% can be foreign owned, but remaining should be Indian owned. But for some, we allowed 100% foreign owning also. This is what this says. Then we created something which is known as Foreign Investment Promotion Board. Its aim was to increase foreign investment and to increase foreign institutional investment in India. At last, we had the exchange rate policy in India. So exchange rate simple tha, apna rupee ko devalue karo. Why was this required? See, there was a big difference between the nominal and real exchange rate. And we wanted to bridge that gap between nominal and real exchange rate. And that is where we brought in the policy to change the exchange rate, to kind of deal with this exchange rate. So we first devalued it. We brought the value down for rupee. And then we also allowed it to be flexible, to move along with the rest of the world. So if we notice, these are all the different plans which were introduced under the 1991 reforms. Fiscal, monetary, exchange rate, industry oriented, and foreign investment oriented, etc. Now let's come to the question. Which of the following is not related to the structural adjustment program in India after 1991? Deregulation of industries, yes, ye hua tha. Quantitative restriction on trade, ye to remove ho gaya tha. Restriction aayi nahi thi, it was reduced. So this is not true. Fiscal austerity, yes, we had to focus on fiscal deficit to maintain fiscal balance. So this is true. Reduction of subsidies, true. Ye bhi, it was under Chelia committee only that reduced subsidies given on the fertilizers, given on sugar. We gave examples. So subsidies were removed. So the only option which is correct out of all these is B, quantitative restriction on trade. Okay, come to the next one. Which of the following measure was introduced in India in the year 1994? So these kind of questions now I feel are a little on top because remembering the year for each and every becomes difficult. This is Narasimha, I just taught you. This was in 1991. Abhi humne dekha. It came, right? Trade policies also we know, but still knowing when full convertibility of current account took place and when full convertibility of capital took place, remembering each and every year is I think difficult. But anyways, what I have done is I've just gone ahead and given some definitions here, which might be useful to you. तो इसको एक बार समझ लो कि current account convertibility होता क्या है. That's important. So current account convertibility is the freedom to convert domestic currency into foreign, but for trade of goods and services. क्योंकि ये current account है. So I should be given the freedom that I can convert rupees to dollar for goods and service. This is what came in 1994. This is the answer to your question. Capital account convertibility. This was introduced by S.S. Tarapore. This is also converting Indian currency to foreign, but this is for buying an asset. This is for capital associated transaction. So capital account convertibility is related to capital associated transaction. It came in 1997. Current account convertibility is related to current account related transaction, matlab goods and services. Narasimha committee, we did this. It came in 1991. It made the banking system stronger. It reformed the way that RBI should be doing things. We talked about reserve ratios. It talked about non-performing assets and capital adequacy ratio. So these were the recommendations it brought in. And then we had the Abid Hussain Committee on Trade Reforms. This was launched a little later in 1997. Okay, now let's talk about the different plans. So these are the different plans that you have. This is easy to remember. Why? Because mainly there are only 4 plans, out of which 3 were asked. Let's look at the different kind of plans that ever existed. So first is the Bombay plan. And how do I tell my students to remember this? See, Bombay is considered as the financial capital. तो यहाँ पर ज़्यादातर चीजें entrepreneurial ही होंगी. It would be related to industries, right? So Bombay plan was related to where it was an 8-member committee that was formed. And it was related where, you know, Tata, Birla, all these people came together. And their aim was to, you know, promote trade. They said that government must play a role. Government should protect us from the outer country, whatever companies are there in the outer world. Government should help us. Government should give us more protection so that we can grow. So it came very early. It came in 1944, and it was set by Indian entrepreneur Birla, Tata, Thakurdas, Lal Bhai. Aim क्या बोल रहा था कि हमें गवर्नमेंट की पार्टिसिपेशन चाहिए so that we are protected. The indigenous companies are protected. The Indian companies are protected against the foreign competition. It was also called as the Tata Plan. It was drafted by John Mathai. He was an economist actually. So although these industrialists came together, but he was one of the economists on the panel. Then we had the Gandhian plan. Again, it is easy to remember. The Gandhian plan, it was launched by Shriman Narayan Agarwal in 1944. Because Gandhian hai, it has to focus on villages. It has to focus on the cottage enterprise. It has to be according to what Gandhi thought. So based on that, it was more of decentralization, giving power to the rural sector, talking about villages, about cottage industries, about promoting small scale production and agriculture. So this is what the Gandhian plan was about. And this is an important thing. So then based on this only, we had Moksha Gundam. He was a Diwan, D-I-W-A-N, Diwan of Mysore. He wrote a book, and this book was called Planned Economy of India, for which he received Bharat Ratna. So you must remember this name because this is an important book for the way that economy should be working. Then the third was People's Plan. This was launched by M.N. Roy in 1945. And since it was a people's plan, if you again, it's a way to remember that, we have to think about public as a whole. So what he said, look, सबसे पहले वो products बनाओ जो consumer oriented है, whatever are consumer manufactured product. So he focused on consumer product manufacturing. He focused on how to deliver. जैसे मैंने एक product one part of the country में बनाया, how do I deliver it all to all the consumers? So I need good infra. So therefore he said, I need railways, I need road, I need shipping, so that I focus on completing the demand of these consumers first. This is what your people's plan was. And then we had the Sarvodaya plan. This was launched in 1950 by Jayaprakash Narayan. This was again focusing on the agricultural sector and not taking any help from the foreign sector, freedom from foreign sector, and the land reforms. Okay, now let's go to the next question. So the next question is, in the context of Indian agriculture, which of the following statements are correct? So NABARD was established in 1982. One of the objectives of CACP was to ensure remunerative prices. APMC Act is related to institutional credit supply in agriculture, and National Commission on Agriculture was chaired by Namdeo. So what you can do is, you can go ahead and you can read about few of the important. I will share it in the group also. I have made that list. Agricultural acts and committees. Right. You can go ahead and read about few of the agricultural act and committees. Just for example, National Commission on Agriculture. This report was under NR Mirdha. Okay. This is important to understand. Some, we can't do all. I mean, there were tremendous number of agricultural acts and committees, but which are the important one? Which committee is the basic agricultural committee, which talks about fertilizer and pesticide? We can go ahead and do about that, which talks about creating market channels for agriculture, which is APMC. We can go ahead and talk about that. So I have made that list and I will share that with you. That's the first thing. The second thing is things which are institutions. Like for example, abhi humne dekha that SEBI was created in 1988 and it was given statutory in 1992. This is SEBI. Aise hi NABARD, right? Aise hi Food Corporation of India, right? The important institutes which all of us know about, which we know are some change making institutes in the history of India. Remember their dates, just the years in which they were created. Again, I will share a table with you on this. So two things, because if you see, its correct option is A and B, and this is actually related to when was NABARD created, right? And you know, the APMC Act, it was related to creating market supplies, to market channels. It wasn't related to creating credit supplies, right? And this wasn't chaired by VM Dandekar, as I just showed you. So the important committees, at least, we must know when was those committees created, and that is where that table will be helpful to you. Okay, so this is it. Now, what I have done apart from this, I have also prepared one more thing that I wanted to share with you. Again, I will share the notes with you, but I wanted to just discuss this topic. And this topic is related to the, one second. This is related to Indian economy at the time of independence. Right. So I would like to divide this topic in multiple parts. And the first part that I would like to discuss is the agriculture. I'll just give you key points, then you can read through my notes. Handwriting issues, you can ask me. Okay. Agriculture mein kya issues the? The first was that we had low productivity. That's the first one. We were not producing good enough. We had disguised unemployment in the economy. We had stagnation in the economy. Agriculture grow nahi kar raha tha. Majority of people were in agriculture, but it wasn't growing. The second issue was related to land. Zamindari system was there. And because majority of people were peasants, they weren't willing to work. They were thinking that, you know, sab kuch to we give it to the zamindars. We don't have anything left. There is no reason working in the agricultural sector. So the zamindari system was a big reason, which was later abolished, but it was a big reason at the time of independence why we were not growing. Then we had high dependence on monsoon. Right? We were focused only on rainfall. We didn't have any green revolution ke time pe we introduced irrigational facilities. But before that, we were super focused on only, you know, how much rainfall will take place. and जिस साल drought, उस साल we will not produce anything. The prices of goods will rise. Economy will be at its worst. So we were dependent on monsoon a lot. Then we had, we had gone ahead and lack of proper input. No fertilizers, no pesticides, no proper tools, no machineries to go ahead and take this agriculture to the next level. Then we have lack of irrigation facilities and negligible use of fertilizer. देखो fertilizer और pesticide एक limit में, especially fertilizer, not pesticides, you have to use it in some proportion. If you don't use it, you will not be able to give nutrition back to the land in a lesser period. So those fertilizers were not available. Later we saw government started giving subsidy on fertilizer. So these were some of the issues that we had in the agricultural sector. The second sector that we must be focusing on is the industrial sector. In industrial sector, first was discriminative tariff policy. So क्या हुआ? देखो जो ब्रिटिशर्स थे उन्होंने बहुत ही डिस्क्रिमिनेटिव टैरिफ पॉलिसी रखी थी. मतलब we were going ahead and we were allowed to do free export of raw material, but when it came to exporting finished goods, we were not allowed. We were doing heavy import of the finished goods at very heavy tariffs. So this was a discriminative policy. जो बाहर से बन के आ रहे थे finished goods, उन पे हम बहुत टैक्स दे रहे थे. जो हमारे raw material बाहर जा रहे थे, we were not getting any money out of it. That's the first aspect. The second aspect was competition from machine. Slowly machines were developing. This is why second 5-year plan focused on heavy and basic machines. Because we were getting competition from machine, we didn't have good machines. We were focused on agricultural sector, wahan pe bhi acha technology we were not using. We focused on handicraft sector, it wasn't doing well because now we were getting machine oriented things. The cloth that we were getting from machinery was much cheaper. India could not compete with that. So we had heavy competition from the machinery sector. Third, we had new pattern of demand. Ab kya hua that, the Britishers, when they came in India, they changed a lot of people. The way that people thought, the way that people demanded. So multiple class of people started demanding foreign goods over Indian goods. So the pattern of demand also changed. Then we had more market. इसी से related है for British goods. Since the pattern of demand changed, since everybody started asking, not everybody, but multiple people asked about the way that Britishers were producing good, that is why we saw that there was more market created for the British oriented goods. The third thing that you should be knowing is foreign trade at the time of independence. We saw there was discriminative tariff policy. Export पे अलग tariff था, import पे अलग tariff था. The issue was India was major exporter of raw material. And it was importer of finished goods. तो import finished goods कर रहे थे, export raw material कर रहे थे. Raw material is cheaper. You're exporting cheaper things. You're getting in finished goods. Now this creates a deficit. But during British era, before independence, we saw that Britishers actually had a surplus. But they used this surplus for wars, right? They used this surplus for their own economy. Whatever surplus they created even in India, they used it for the purpose of war and for their economy. And once we got independence, we saw that slowly, because we were dependent too much on the outer world, we were going towards the deficit of balance of payment. So actually this trade pattern, when you give raw material and you buy finished goods, this is a classic trade pattern of backwardness. So which means India was much backward as compared to the other economies. That's the third aspect. Then the fourth is demographic profile. So during independence, we had high birth and death rate. This was 8 per 1,000 people. हर 1,000 लोगों में 8 people were dying. That's high death rate. So we had very high birth and death rate. Secondly, we had low life expectancy. People were dying at the age of 32 on an average. 32 years was the life age of people, which means bad health structure, bad health infrastructure, right? Lots of healthcare was required in the country. And the literacy rate was also very low. It was at 16%. So very low literacy rate existed in the country. Then the next aspect was related to occupation. So the primary occupation was agriculture. It was 72.7%. And it was followed by the service sector. That was 17.2%. And then the manufacturing sector, which was 10.1%. So actually, there is a full-fledged paper which talks about the missing hand. Okay, in India. So it's a very big paper that was written. I don't know who, I forgot who wrote that. It was in one of the readings of Delhi University. This talked about how usually when economies transition, they go from agriculture to manufacturing to service, right? If you follow this pattern, if you start with agriculture, slowly you reduce your agricultural sector, go towards manufacturing, increase your manufacturing sector, become heavy industry oriented, make your own capital goods, and then slowly you transition and generate jobs in the service sector. This is the usual demographic transition that you should follow in the occupational side. And this helps you to grow as a strong economy. But in India, what happened? We missed out on this. And what India did is we started from agriculture and we moved directly to the service sector. And when we moved from agriculture to service, skipping the manufacturing sector, that is where our growth changed. So we became dependent on the outer world. Because हम जो call centers and जो भी MNCs create कर रहे थे, we were just helping the outer world. So tomorrow when the outer world would fail, our economy would fail because our jobs are related to their jobs. So actually, this was the wrong thing that we did right from the start, that the manufacturing sector was lagged, and we continue to see that the service sector grew at a rate higher than the manufacturing. We never ended up focusing on the manufacturing sector in the right way, right? If you see again, the second 5-year plan did that. That's a good aspect. But not many 5-year plans focused on the manufacturing sector or building the heavy industry or becoming, self-sufficient oriented, right? Self-reliant. So this was the occupational sector. And then we had the infrastructural sector. Telecommunication and transport and telecommunication, they grew at a decent rate. Okay. But what grew at the best rate during the British era when we got independence, during the period of independence, was railways. Because the Britishers had to transport things from one place to another for their own trade. And when they had to do this, they had to have a good system to do the transport. So the railway system was a big breakthrough when India got its independence. And one more thing happened, which was the transition from barter system towards the monetary system. This happened, when during the Raja Maharaja period in India, we did not have a very good monetary system. This was set up by the Britishers. And this was a good thing that happened when we got independence, because this helped us to progress, to do better exchange, right, of goods and services. So this is, because they have this topic of what happened during the colonial period and at the time of independence, you can divide this in multiple parts. What happened in the agricultural sector, in the industrial sector, in foreign trade sector, on the demography side, on the occupational side, and the infrastructural side, right? So with this, we will end today's class.